and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO with Martin Willis and Michael Lauk. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com. Check out the latest blogs and forums, and while you're there, don't forget to like our very active Facebook page.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. Michael Lauk will be joining us in just a second. Today is podcast number 67. It's with Tom Carey about his co-authored book, Inside the Real Area 51, which is about Wright, Patterson Air Force Base. Interesting interview, and for right now, we're going to check in with Michael about the news. How you doing, Michael?
Great. How are you doing this week?
Well, I'm doing just great. What's up?
Great. Well, you know, it's kind of a slow news week, but we do have a few stories to bring our listeners, and I would just like to remind everybody that they can find more information about all of our stories through the links in our show notes at podcastufo.com.
Oh, I want to say something. Peggy is off on some type of road trip, so she's the one who manages our Facebook page, and she does all that work. It's always greatly appreciated. So now I'm at the helm, so it's not going to be quite so good for the next 4 or 5 days, but hey, I'll do my best.
Well, maybe she'll check in from the road.
She said no. She said she wouldn't.
Okay, fine, Peggy. Be like that.
I still love her anyway. Okay, so what's going on?
Okay, first of all, we have a controversial new claim of alien life. A research balloon sent up to an altitude of 17 miles by British scientists returned with evidence of microscopic algae found at that height. According to the research team behind the balloon, this algae must have originated elsewhere because it is too heavy to have been lifted to such a height by anything except for a volcanic eruption, and it has been years since a sufficiently forceful eruption has occurred. Other scientists are not convinced that the algae is from off-planet, though. Although it is an unexpected find at that altitude, nothing else in the sample so far suggests that it is extraterrestrial. The team is examining their findings further, hoping to find support for their extraterrestrial theory.
Well, yeah, I think I read about this like about a week and a half ago or something like that, and there was some scientists claiming that it might have come in through the meteor shower in August every year because of the P.
Perseid.
How do you say it?
Perseid?
Yeah. Why did they have to make it such a tough name? Perseid.
It's all Greek to me, sir.
Okay. So anyway, they're claiming that it might have come in that way. I'm sounding like a skeptic, but I think it's kind of a leap to say that it came in from elsewhere. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it is the kind of thing that might be evidence eventually, but isn't at this point a conclusive nail in the coffin kind of proof of panspermia, as they call the theory that life here began out there. I did see a show just what was our last night, because we taped this a little early, on Discovery Science called The Unexplained Files, and they were talking about a red rain that had been happening.
Oh, yes.
Okay, and that there was a researcher there who found cells similar to what was found in the red rain in what appeared to be the remains of a meteor strike, and he is arguing something very similar. Who knows, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. I wonder if Greer is on this. Maybe he actually sent something up in a weather balloon. You
just can't leave Greer alone, can you?
I'm sorry. No. I can't leave Greer alone. First of all, Peggy's going to come on sooner or later and talk about him locking all those people in during his conference. And didn't you know something about him charging admission to an invisible UFO for people to go inside of it? Was it you?
I believe that was Peggy as well.
Okay.
I just offered to sell people photographs of invisible UFOs.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah. Well, they can go to our website, which is podcastufo.com, look at the donation button, and donate as much as possible, and we'll make sure to get that to Michael for your picture of the invisible UFO.
In fact, they can send me their pictures, and I'll circle the invisible UFOs in them and send them back.
You could channel them?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
Sounds good. All right.
The next ion drive, or the NASA Evolutionary Xenon Thruster, has set an endurance record after continuously running for over 48,000 hours, or 5.5 years. During this time, the engine has consumed less than 2,000 pounds of fuel compared to the 22,000 pounds that a conventional rocket would have needed to create the same amount of thrust. Ion drives operate by pushing a stream of ions, or charged particles, to create thrust. Now, this allows them to use a very low amount of fuel and run for a very long time, but they are extremely slow to accelerate. Nonetheless, they are becoming a viable option for deep space missions.
I'm not like an astrophysicist or a nuclear physicist or anything like that, but it would seem to me that it would make sense to have a dual thruster system, first of all, to get up to a high rate of speed, and then to set this baby into action. What do you think about that?
Well, the way ion drives have been working so far, there's no way you're going to leave Earth orbit with one.
Right.
So you're going to have to either be built in space or boosted on some kind of other platform. But I think you're right. But I don't know that you necessarily even need two thrusters. You could pull one of the slingshot maneuvers, which everyone, the kind of thing they talk about in Star Trek movies, for example, right? To get yourself going, and then supplement it from there with the ion drive, which is just incredibly consistent and but very slow. But even a tiny acceleration over a great amount of time, when it's consistent, can build to quite impressive speeds. So I think this is a real option for the future.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's only 10% or less than 10% of the fuel needed.
Yeah, and I think if anybody wants to learn more about the kind of theories behind this, it's something Stanton Friedman talks about quite a bit in his lectures.
Yes, I heard Stanton talk about this recently, and I actually sat down and recorded with him. He'll be back for the 4th time, and that podcast is coming up on October 11th.
And that's great, because it's always good to hear from Stan.
That's right. He's a cool guy. Texas
sightings get media attention. The media in Dallas is not only reporting on UFO sightings seriously, they are also picking up MUFON reports calling the Lone Star State a hotspot. In a story first run by the Dallas Morning News, which we have linked to in our show notes, and picked up by other media outlets, it was pointed out that MUFON has stated that 3 of last year's 10 strongest cases came from Texas, and that the state is consistently in the top 5 states for reports. The morning news story also includes a recent sighting by Johnson County Correctional Facility employees.
It seems to me that the media is taking this seriously in Texas, and I'm rather impressed by this.
It's great. They need a break from reporting on cattle.
Cattle mutilations or cattle?
No, just cattle.
Okay.
There's nothing in Texas. No. Yeah, no, I will do it seriously now. No, yeah, it is great that they are reporting on it. I think they've kind of had to, partially because of all the sightings they're having recently, but ever since the Stevensville sighting, and its proximity to the ex-president's ranch, it has become a big deal there, and kind of an unavoidable big deal.
I hate correcting you, Michael. I really do. So keep that in mind. But it's Stephenville.
Stephenville.
Yeah.
I put an extra S in because it's big like Texas.
Okay, that works. So Cornwall.
Yes, the Cornwall UFO Research Group is going to hold its 17th annual conference. That will be on October 12th, and it will be held at Truro College. Speakers will cover Atlantis, the supposed 1961 Exeter Interstellar Treaty, and more. And part of the reason I bring this up, Martin, is you've been going to several conferences lately, and I was wondering, how do you select a UFO conference?
Well, region helps, as far as not being able to travel. The one I went to in North Carolina, I was real excited to go to because it was more like on the scientific tact. And I have had a couple of people email me, one from the UK actually, that said that he will absolutely not go to any UFO symposiums, conventions, or anything like that anywhere near him. He has to travel far. So I think if I was to give advice, if you have the means and you pick one out that you really have an interest in and you're interested in the speakers that will be there, go for it. But if something's happening regionally, at least you can connect with people that have a shared interest. And that's what I really enjoyed about going to the last one in particular.
Is there anything you avoid?
Dr. Stephen Greer.
I mean, there are definitely topics that I hear and I immediately just ignore everything that comes after what they say. So I think it's fair to perhaps put Stephen Greer in that category if you've made up your mind on him.
Well, not to give too much of a spoiler here, but in the interview coming up with Tom Carey, we talk a bit about Bob Lazar, and Tom basically says that Bob Lazar would not hold up in a court of law because once you tell one lie, your credibility is gone. And for some reason, that kind of makes me think of Dr. Stephen Greer. And every time I pick on Greer, we lose listeners. So I apologize if I'm offending anyone out there a little bit.
Well, you have to stay true to your own beliefs and theories, and apologize. I'll apologize to anybody who are Stephen Greer fans out there, but we've seen some things that make us question him, and perhaps we shouldn't pick on him so much. But there are other topics like, for instance, I've never heard of the 1961 Exeter Interstellar Treaty. Have you?
Yeah, at first when you read that, I was thinking Incident Exeter, which we actually have someone coming up talking about that topic on our podcast. But no, we're talking about England.
Is it fair to kind of block out certain topics, prejudge things as soon as you hear them?
Yeah, well, yes, and I have mixed feelings about the abduction phenomena, but I went to the Experience to Speak, which was all about abductions, and there are some that seem so solid that I kind of agree with what Travis Walton says. Why should I judge? I don't have enough information to judge. So I'm open-minded, and I went to that, and it was absolutely great. So I think, again, if something's happening regionally and you haven't gone to that particular conference yet, go check it out. Why not? Even if it's something you disagree with, you're bound to hear something that you agree with and also meet people that you connect with.
I think that's hard to argue with, for sure.
Any conferences out your way at all, Michael?
There's the one in the Ozarks.
I heard that's really good.
I have heard that as well. I have to admit, I am not a conference, convention, gathering kind of person by and large.
But it would be great. I would like to go to one with you at some point, and maybe some fans come hang out with us.
I could probably do that, sure. But yeah, I probably will end up going one now that we're doing this so often here eventually. But I'll admit that I am prejudiced against certain topics. There's certain words I hear, and I'm going to skip right over something.
Yeah,
I see that a lot of people sometimes just go way, way out there and they try to go even further. And, people listen to them. Sorry if you're listening and you're one of those people, but we'll just buy anything. And I just caution to, approach everything with a little bit of skepticism at least, so you just, don't lose your
credulosity. Is that a word? It is now.
It is now. So you don't lose your credulosity. Is that what it is?
I'm pretty sure that's not a word. I'm pretty sure I just made that up. But no, I mean, yeah, I guess skeptic is not a bad word, and we do need to be skeptical because otherwise, why not believe the nice Nigerian man who keeps sending me emails and explaining to me that he has a large sum of money for me?
Oh, yes. Or bases on the moon. I'm not going to go there. But anyway, Michael, it's been fun. Thank you. And we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
I'm with Tom Carey. How you doing, Tom?
What do you say? I'm glad to be with you, Martin.
Yes, now I've had Don Schmidt on in the past, and we're going to talk about your new book that you did with Don Schmidt, Inside the Real Area 51. I want to talk quickly about this recent disclosure the government did of actually admitting there was an Area 51.
That's a very interesting happening, Martin, because, the Area 51 in Nevada, near the Nellis test range, has been in existence since 1955. It was created, it was established to test spy planes that were under development in the mid-50s. The most famous one, of course, being the U-2, then the A-12 Oxcart, which spun off to the SR-71 Blackbird. High altitude. These are high altitude spy planes. This is before the age of satellites, and they were built to overfly the Soviet Union, the old Soviet Union. And one of them was shot down in May of 1960, and there was a big international incident over it. So the Area 51 that we know and love became an issue when a fellow by the name of Robert Lazar in the late 1980s came out and said that he worked there because no one really heard 51 when these spy planes, nobody thought of Area 51. It was only when the UFO connection, the possible UFO connection, foreign technology and foreign life forms, the notion that they were being stored possibly at Area 51, did it become a household name. So, but the government, our government, it was initially established by the CIA because they ran the spy plane program. But our government, of course, said, we don't have anything there. No, we do not have anything there. And yet you could go to Rachel, Nevada, go to that little alien there that they created in the back of somebody's pickup, and you could see it. You could see it. So that goes on for a couple decades. And in the 1990s, Bill Clinton is now president. A couple of employees that worked at Area 51 filed suit against the U.S. government, claiming that they were exposed to hazardous waste material, that the facility they were dumping, I guess they call it hazmat, hazardous waste material.
Right.
They were disposing of it there, and these people were getting sick, and they blamed it on the improper disposal of hazardous waste material. Well, the cases were settled, and the Air Force, I'll just say the government finally admitted that, yes, they had a facility there. But they didn't give it, they admitted, yes, we have a facility there, but no name was spoken about. And but they at least admitted that they had something there. So that's a mid-1990s.
Yeah.
Well, here we are in 2013, and God knows, I don't know why they finally admitted. The CIA came out, I guess it was in late July, early August, and said, well, yes, we do have a facility. There was a facility. It was later taken over by the Air Force when they created the stealth B-2 bomber and the stealth F-117 fighter, and perhaps something called the Aurora, which is like a mythological high-altitude Mach 4 aircraft that some people claim is being tested there. So they finally admitted, yes, we do have a facility there, or we had one. and it was called Area 51, or at least it was located in Area 51 on the map. Well, that was a couple weeks ago, but the thing was, in their release, there was no mention in the official release, which constituted over 400 pages. There was no mention of UFOs or alien life forms or technology or anything. It was just that they admitted that there was a facility named, popularly named Area 51. So, so UFO guys like us, and I don't consider myself a UFO guy because the only case I'm working for the last 22 years has been Roswell. You wonder, well, why are they telling us now? Well, the hope is, and I don't subscribe to this, I wonder what the next revelation is going to be. Are they finally going to admit that they have UFOs and alien cadavers stashed there? That's the big mystery, is if they're preparing us for something, or is this the end of something, so to sort of make us go away for a while. So that's the question that we have now.
Yeah, some people are thinking it's a baby step, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's just one more little step to admitting that, yes, by the way, we do have creatures there. They're from various planets in the universe. Yes, we've had them for a while. And yes, we've been back engineering their technology for decades. That's the hope. I don't subscribe to it, but that's the hope.
Yes. Now, you brought up the name Bob Lazar, and that he's kind of a controversial figure. Some people completely discount him. A lot of people do. And some people think that perhaps his background was skewed a bit, so people wouldn't believe him. And where do you rest on that?
Martin, in a court of law, if you're caught in a lie, you are toast. Whatever else you might say is given no credibility if you're caught in an untruth. And where he got himself into trouble was with his educational background. Mm-hmm. He claimed that he had degrees from two of our most prestigious institutions, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge, Mass.
Yep.
And the California Institute of Technology, better known as Caltech. A check of the records there, people have checked this out. You can't say anything that it isn't checked out. Maybe he thought we wouldn't check out. I didn't do it personally, but they have no record of, both of those institutions have no record of Robert Lazar ever attending class there. So that sort of puts a black mark on not only his educational background, but his whole claim that he worked on alien technology. He claimed he was an engineer, a physicist, and God knows what else. And so, but the thing is, Martin, if you actually look at him speak in some of these documentaries, he projects very well.
He does. He's intelligent for sure.
Yes, he projects like, oh my goodness, this guy is a genius. It looks like he's telling the truth, but yet he lied about his educational background. So I have to discount him until something comes along that will clean up that educational background.
Sure.
There's one other thing that is a sort of the stake in the heart, so to speak. The old Bela Lugosi vampire. You put a stake in his heart. I have a friend in Florida, another UFO researcher named Anthony Bragalia, and he had interviewed Bob Lazar some years ago. And Bragalia is from Boston, which is just right across the river from Cambridge. Mm-hmm. And he interviewed Lazar, and he says, so Lazar asked him where he lives. He said, I live in Boston. And so Anthony said, well, you went to Cambridge, right? MIT. Oh, yes, I was. Yes, I went to MIT. Well, then you know where I live. He said, what is the name of the landmark right in front of Fenway Park that anybody who lived in Boston or Cambridge for any period of time would know instantly, and he couldn't name it. It was called Kenmore Square.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Lazar didn't know what he was talking about. So for Anthony Bragalia, who's an excellent researcher, that was the stake in the heart for Bob Lazar. He couldn't come up with the Kenmore Square, and so that was it for him.
Now I do believe George Knapp still believes in him.
Yeah.
But,
yes.
Yeah. And George Knapp is such a balanced and intelligent person.
Absolutely. We did a show with George about a month and a half ago. And fortunately, we did not get into talking about Bob Lazar. George is a great guy, and it was a great interview, but we disagree about Bob Lazar. And I'm guessing that the people who still support Lazar, and I guess George Knapp does, I guess their position is, well, the government scrubbed their records.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And, of course, there's no way of knowing that. But if you're in a court of law, Martin, you know what would happen to Bob Lazar.
Well said. All right, moving on. Can you give a synopsis of your book?
The book Inside the Real Area 51 is really not about Area 51 itself. It's about Wright Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. And the reason we wanted to do this book was because, and our publisher came up with the title. We had a different title, but our publisher came up with the connection to Area 51 because everybody recognizes what that is,
Right. Uh-huh.
And it would alert, the casual bookstore browser that, this is about Area 51 or UFOs or something, you know what I mean? Something like that. Mm-hmm. But all of your Roswell books, including the two that Don Schmidt and I wrote together, Witness to Roswell, first edition and second edition, all of the Roswell books leave off when the wreckage and the bodies are delivered to Wright Patterson in 1947. That's where all the bodies went to Wright Patterson, the wreckage went to Wright Patterson, end of story. Well, what happened after that? So we wanted to there have been books that maybe had a chapter about Wright Patterson or a paragraph or two. Our entire book is about Wright Patterson Air Force Base and its secret history and how it came about. And it discusses the Roswell wreckage and the life forms that were brought there, what happened to them, where they were stored. It answers a lot of the questions that the people have that haven't been answered before. And we wanted to do this in a single book. And there's a lot of new information, not only about the base itself, but about J. Allen Hynek and Project Blue Book. Mm-hmm. And because, Don Schmidt was a student of J. Allen Hynek. And he had a lot of information that he's been sitting on for decades and that he wanted to get out about J. Allen Hynek and his relationship to UFOs and the Project Blue Book. And that's a number of chapters in there about that. And so the feedback we've gotten so far, Martin, has been it's been just as good as that our two Roswell books, Witness to Roswell.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, it does seem like a place that always does come up. And what kind of things did you uncover?
Well, the first one, let me ask you. You've heard of Wright Patterson, right?
Oh yeah.
What's the first question you have about it?
Oh well, it's the place where the Roswell crash was supposed to be brought to. I mean, the wreckage.
What specific location there?
Hangar 18.
Bingo. That's the first question everybody has. Where's Hangar 18? Is that where the aliens are stored? Well, we answer that question in our book. It was, because when we started the book, I didn't have an answer for that. I knew that the term was out there, Hangar 18. I know that the information desk at Wright Patterson, if you go up to it and ask the person there, where's hangar 18? They'll say, what are you talking about? There is no hangar 18, and there never was a hangar 18 here. And they will be right. They will be correct. And so what happens is you walk away scratching your head thinking, oh, my God, how stupid am I? I feel like a fool. But they're actually lying to you. Technically, there was no hangar 18, but they know you're asking about the aliens. Mm-hmm. That's what they know. You're asking about that, and they won't give you an answer. So they send you away with there's no hangar 18 and never was. Well, what happened was it goes back to the early 70s. When a fellow by the name of Robert Spencer Carr, he billed himself as professor, but he just had a high school education, and he's down there in Florida. Now, you know that a lot of military people in the past have retired to Florida. Mm-hmm. You know, so what happened was he would give lectures about UFOs. He had a little lecture circuit down there in Florida about UFOs. And what happens, and I know this for a fact, if you give a lecture, people come up to you afterwards and say, well, I had this sighting, or I know something about this, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And so what happened to him was he had a number of people who used to be stationed or worked at Wright Patterson Air Force Base tell him, well, that's where the aliens were stored, blah, 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 blah. And so what he did is he assumed, now this is like 1972, 73, 74. This is long before anybody ever heard of Roswell. Mm-hmm. Because the Roswell book came out in 1980, the Roswell incident. Well, he had never heard of Roswell, but these people who were talking to him said, well, there was a crash in New Mexico, and that's where the bodies were taken. That's where the wreckage was taken, blah, blah, blah. There's a hangar there. It's actually hangar 23 where they were taken. And but ultimately they transferred that stuff to Building 18. Building 18. Well, when Robert Spencer Carr went public with this story, somehow the hangar and the building morphed into Hangar 18. So it was an amalgam of Hangar 23 and Building 18 came out Hangar 18, and it's still with us today. I mean, I still refer to it as Hangar 18 myself today, but it was Building 18. There's Building 18, Building 18A, B, C, D, and E, and F. So there's a Building 18 complex there that included cold storage, examination labs, you name it. And Hangar 23 was the place where, during World War II, the German and Japanese aircraft were brought, and in the Cold War, the Russian MiGs were brought to back engineer them, to tear them apart, to see what made them go, and try to build aircraft that would defeat them. And that was done in Hangar 23. So when the Roswell crash occurred, boy, what more foreign aircraft or foreign machine could you have than something from another planet? So that's where the Roswell wreckage was taken, was Hangar 23. The bodies were taken to Building 18, and ultimately they spent some time in the aeromedical hospital to be dissected and what have you. But the main storage areas for these items was Hangar 23 and the Building 18 complex. So that's where it was. But when Robert Spencer Carr talked about it, he talked about a Hangar 18. And the other thing he was doing was he was resurrecting. I don't know if you remember. Well, you're too young to remember, but you might have heard about Frank Scully in 1950 wrote a book about the so-called Aztec New Mexico.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And it was called Behind the Flying Saucers. It was a top-selling book, and it was the first flying saucer book about a crash. 1950. The crash allegedly took place in March of 1948. But that book was roundly criticized when it was learned that Scully's two sources were two oil con men. And,
right. I remember that. Yeah. I remember reading about that. Actually, we have a blog on our website about that whole situation.
Yes. And the case has been reopened by a fellow by the name of Scott Ramsey 2 years ago, and he's got a book out on. He reopened the case, and so that's give a little plug for Scott. But back when Robert Spencer Carr was talking about this, he was talking about the Aztec case and the bodies allegedly going to Wright Patterson, and unfortunately for him, they analyzed his data and they debunked the case once again, this for the second time.
Really?
And yes, and they debunked Robert Spencer Carr along with the case. So that was that. But the term got out. Hangar 18 was out there, and they made a movie in 1980.
Right.
Same year as the Roswell incident book came out, called Hangar 18, starring the man from U.N.C.L.E., Robert Vaughn, and Darren McGavin, the fellow that was in that Christmas movie, and those were the two stars of Hangar 18.
I actually like that movie. Now, does Kecksburg ever come up as being transported there?
Yeah.
The Bell or whatever
I think Stan Gordon, he's the lead investigator on the 1965 Kecksburg, Pennsylvania alleged crash, that the material was taken to Wright Patterson. And there's another story of the Fort Dix case. I don't know if you've ever talked about the Fort Dix case. In 1978, there was in Fort Dix, New Jersey, right next to McGuire Air Force Base. It's a joint base. And there was a report of UFOs over the base. And radar, the radar had them coming down somewhere near the base. And lo and behold, an alien turns up, walking, trying to get over the fence from McGuire to.
Yes.
And
I heard about this. Yes.
Yes, and it's shot by one of the sentries, and it's lying there on the tarmac, or the concrete. And the story is that a plane flew in from Wright Patterson, and they packed it away, and it was flown back to Wright Patterson. And unfortunately, this is the main witness. Only one witness who has ever talked about this, and unfortunately, last I heard, he was in Indonesia, and how can you get to him? So I tried to investigate that case with George Filer, but it didn't go anywhere. I couldn't get anywhere on it, so I basically gave up because we couldn't get beyond that one witness who was away in, I don't know if you call it Malaysia or Indonesia, Borneo, Sumatra, that area. And I never did get to interview the fellow, but that's still a case on the books. And the cadaver was taken to Wright Patterson.
Now, how does your military background help you in your investigation?
It helps me in that I understand the military mindset. I had a top secret clearance for what I did, but in 4 years in the Air Force, you get to know how the military operates and what the mentality and the mindset is. That has been a big help to me in interviewing retired military. because I know exactly how they feel about things and what they're talking about. And unless you've been in the military, for a couple of years, I'm not talking about getting in for 6 months and out. I mean, having to actually spend a couple of years in there, it's a sobering experience. And not that I recommend it to her, but it was good for me. And so that's how it's helped me, Martin, is I understand when I interview military people, we're on the same wavelength.
I see. That's great. Just going off topic just a little bit, I want to talk briefly about Roswell, but I also want to talk about Roswell in the skeptics and debunkers facing off against them. It's one of the cases I always bring up when I'm actually doing some type of debate in regards to UFOs. Is the number one thing I always say is, why on earth would the Army Air Force actually publish in a newspaper and send a press release saying that they captured a flying disc? Just for them to answer that alone, there's no real answer for that.
We've gone around and around and around and around on this question. We're always asked that question. In fact, Don and I disagreed on it for the longest time. I thought it was a local faux pas by the local base commander there at Roswell. I thought he had just made a mistake. But it turns out, because of Walter Haut's sealed statement, that it was all orchestrated from Washington. The reason they had to put out, because why would you, if you want to cover something up, why would you call attention to it with a that was my point. Well, the reason they put out the first press release that they had captured a flying saucer was because the story was already out amongst the citizens in Roswell, going all the way up to Corona. And it was already in the press because the rancher, Mac Brazel, when he came to town, the first person he spoke to was the sheriff in Roswell, George Wilcox, and the sheriff connected him with, while he was talking to the sheriff, the radio station KGFL in Roswell called the sheriff's office just looking for, local stories that they might put on over the radio.
That was good timing.
Yes. He happened. His name was Frank Joyce, was the announcer, and he was spinning records and talking about local stories, and how the cost of cattle feed and that sort of stuff. And he called as a regular course. He would call the sheriff. Does anything going on there? And actually, they did have a good story. The country singer Lefty Frizzell was in jail there at the time. So he connected Frank Joyce with Mac Brazel, the rancher who brought all this stuff into town. So the story was out. If it wasn't out, they wouldn't have had to put out a press release. So they decided, we got to do something here because this story's already in the press. So we got to make everybody feel stupid about this. So they put out the story. They set up a straw man that they had captured a flying saucer, and they were right about that. Although they didn't capture it, they recovered it. But so that story went out. Well, within hours, they changed it to the weather balloon story. General Roger Ramey in Fort Worth, who the 8th Air Force was the next unit up from the 509th Bomb Group in Roswell. He held a press conference saying that the fellas over in Roswell made a mistake, folks. It wasn't a flying saucer, an interplanetary ship that they found. It was a weather balloon. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want people who can't tell the difference between a UFO or an interplanetary spaceship and a radar target, a little flimsy tinfoil radar target and a rubber weather balloon. I don't want them to be the group that has their finger on the atomic trigger.
Exactly.
because
Yeah.
they were the only group in the world that had the atomic bomb, and that was their sole purpose of existence, was to, in time of war, to drop the atomic bomb on the other, most probably the Soviet Union. I don't want them with their finger on the trigger if they can't tell the difference between a rubber weather balloon and something from another planet. But that's what they did. They put that story out, and then they took it away with the weather balloon story, and everybody went home feeling stupid. And the press dropped the story right there. That was their main thing, was to kill it in the press, which they did. But the other thing was, and you could control it in the military, because you would say, well, oh, you want to talk about that? You want to talk about that flying saucer? How would you like to read about it in Leavenworth?
Uh-huh.
That's what they did. They threatened the people with Leavenworth if they continued to talk about it on the base.
Yeah.
But the wild card was the civilians, because unless it's a case of martial law being imposed, they had no control over the citizens of Roswell and the outlying ranchers. So what they did is they enlisted the sheriff to deliver death threats in Roswell to the people who had actually seen the wreckage, and especially those who had seen the bodies, the little bodies. The Sheriff Wilcox delivered the death threat. We're going to not only kill you, we're going to kill your children if you ever talk about this. Now, to me, that's a violation of your civil rights, but that's what they did. And just to make sure, a couple weeks later, they brought in this guy from Wright Patterson named Hunter Penn to reinforce that threat. And this guy was a nut job. It was like in time of war, break the glass only in time of war, and unleash Hunter Penn on somebody. So he traveled around to the local ranchers with the death threat again. If the ranchers ever talked, and if the civilians ever talked. So that's how they did it, is they set up a straw man only because the story was out. If it wasn't for that, they wouldn't have had these series of newspaper stories about it. And the thing was, Martin, the newspaper accounts never mentioned aliens or flying saucers or anything extraterrestrial. They referred to the flying saucer as an instrument. Now, to me, that sounds like a little gadget,
Mm-hmm.
like a little gadget. They never referred to anything that was off planet. So,
Wow.
So that's how they dealt with it, and it worked for 30 years.
I never heard that side of it. That's really fascinating to me. One more Roswell question is, last time I had Don Schmidt on was quite a while ago, and he was chasing some supposed evidence at the time, and he was real busy. Did anything come out of that?
We're still chasing.
Really? The same?
We're still, as we speak, we're still chasing, to use Don's term.
Wow.
I am, that's all I can tell you.
It'll be interesting to see what happens through that.
It will be.
Yeah. All right, getting back to Wright Patterson, are there people that are ex-military, retired military, that are actually talking about things that they've seen there?
Well, you have to understand that if you're 20 years old in 1947, you're very old today. So there aren't many left that are what we would call first-hand witnesses to anything. Very few left. And so we get most of our stories that originate in 1947 from family members. But we do get stories of people who worked at Wright Patterson. And we have several of from family members of people who actually helped construct the underground hangars that go down as far as 10 levels.
Really?
Under the ground, under Building 18 and Hangar 23. Building 18 and Hangar 23 were connected underground, so you could go back and forth. And today, and if you go on the base, even today, you're struck by the number of air vents that come out of the ground. And you can only draw one conclusion, that there's a lot of Wright Patterson Air Force Base that's underground. It's like there's another city underground now, full of vaults and tunnels and hangars, and they go down several levels. Now today, I know for a fact that Hangar 23 has been cemented over. Like really? If you go in you can't like, oh well, there's nothing underground. Well, they put a fresh coat of cement on the floor to cover up all the entrances to the underground levels. We don't believe that the wreckage and the bodies are there anymore. We believe that they left, were taken elsewhere, perhaps to Area 51 in the early 80s. But all that stuff has been covered over. But,
are you saying that it's completely sealed?
Well, Hangar 23 and Building 18 are.
And all those underground levels are sealed off?
Yes.
Wow.
But that's not for the entire base. That's for the Building 18 complex and Hangar 23, and perhaps other buildings as well. But it's as though they said, "Okay, fellas, it's getting too hot here. We got to move this stuff elsewhere." And it's like when you're on the dusty trail and you want to cover your tracks, you take something to sweep your tracks, Mm-hmm. And we think that's what they did.
Okay. So now I want to talk to you, get your take on Chase Brandon, because I've had someone else on the show that thought he was, I thought right away it was really silly that someone would find a box marked Roswell, and according to Grant Cameron, that was just his way of saying it without spilling the beans, or a little bit of truth, a little bit of lie mixed in together to actually say something he wanted to say. But what's your take on that whole situation?
My take on that, Martin, is that Chase Brandon, or Brandon Chase, I don't know which is the first word. He was selling a book. He had a book that was coming out, and he was spicing it up a bit with this. I believe it was a tall tale. We've never heard of a Roswell folder in that he could walk in and, oh boy, what do I got here? Oh, this is about Roswell, and there's no way to corroborate that. Mm-hmm. His story might be true, but there's no way to corroborate that. And the fact that he had a book coming out at the same time, to me, tells me he was just giving you a little teaser. He was throwing out a teaser, like, oh my goodness, maybe there's more in the book about that. And so we just wrote that story off. But there was another fellow after Chase Brandon with a similar scenario. He had a book, and he threw a teaser out that involved Roswell. And all it is, it lets you know that Roswell is still, people are still interested in it. A lot of people think, oh, well, there can't be any more to learn. Well, there is. And, somebody like a Chase Brandon or this other fellow might have new information. People are interested in it.
Well, speaking of a teaser, we're just about out of time here, but is there another little teaser you can throw away for someone that might be interested in buying your book?
Yes. We have a chapter in the book called The Jawbone That Spoke Martian. It's about a strange jawbone that originated at Wright Patterson, that came into our knowledge. And it's a very interesting story about this jawbone that it's been I have a background in physical anthropology myself. And I at first thought it was a prosimian, like a lemur, the ring-tailed lemurs that you see at the zoo.
Right.
I thought it might be something like that. But having seen it in real time, at least the plaster cast of it, it's too large for for it to be a prosimian or a lemur. And other physical anthropologists that have looked at it have stated that it's no known primate. They know of no primate or earthly animal with that jawbone. So we have a chapter on the jawbone that spoke Martian, and you might find that interesting.
Great. So why don't you throw out your website?
Our website is www.roswellinvestigator. It's all one word, www.roswellinvestigator.com. And our book, Inside the Real Area 51, The Secret History of Wright Patterson, can be purchased at your friendly Barnes & Noble store, if they're still friendly. And also on Amazon, you can get it in hardback, in a regular paperback. You can get it on Kindle, you can get it on ebook, you can get it on whatever electronic version you want, they have it.
All right, well, thank you so much, Tom. It's been a real pleasure.
The pleasure was mine.
Thank you for listening to our show, and please remember to check out our website, podcastufo.com, for the latest blogs and forums. We never like talking about money, but we rely on your support. On our sidebar, we have a subscription button where you can help us out for under the cost of a couple of cups of coffee a month. If you cannot help us out, we still appreciate every single listener. Thank you, and remember, keep your eyes to the sky.